There we go. We're recording. So a few weeks back, they put out Trusted Advisors put out anybody want to help out on some of these learning labs, and financial services was one of them. Given I've spent the last 35 years of my career in the financial services business, I reached out to Wendy and said, "Would you like to do it?" She said, "Since nobody else has stepped forward, I guess you're going to do it." So here we find ourselves today. What I originally thought that I wanted to do was kind of talk through kind of the three areas of financial services: wealth management, insurance, and banking. A little bit of what I'm seeing and hearing out there, and then just kind of open it up for discussion with everybody about what they're seeing or hearing or feeling if they're working in the financial services business. Last week, Rick Lochner had made an observation on the new reality versus new normal. And I totally agree with that, and it really struck a chord with me. I was hoping that he'd be on here today to maybe talk a little bit more about that. And Jeff, we talked about it in our call here a little bit earlier today, that this new reality really isn't a reality or isn't something new for anybody in any one of their industries. It's just that right now, no matter what industry you're in or what station you're in within your companies, everybody's going through the same thing at the same time. Where, typically, we go through disruption all the time. Financial services, we've been in disruption since at least 2001, when the planes hit the towers. It's, we have the Sarbanes-Oxley, we've had, just all these, the U.S. Patriot Act. But with that came all sorts of new compliance regulations and things that we had to do. And kind of that's been the new normal in financial services. Disruption is the new normal. And I kind of think that for a lot of industries and a lot of what we're going through here this is normal in some way. We need to kind of lock in and assume that going forward, they may not be black swan events like this, but certainly within the industries, with whatever industry you're working in, you're going to have these really highly disruptive times, and you're going to want to be have your skill set for you and your employees best suited to handle and manage through it. Talking about financial services in general, again, Dodd-Frank, Patriot Act, Sarbanes-Oxley, which I already mentioned, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP, in 2009, something like that. We're now going through in wealth management a thing called Reg BI, which is best interest. It's a fiduciary rule that we've been fighting, or I say fighting back and forth, different camps on what this looks like and how it gets applied. But it's come into June, every firm out there will have to begin to abide by it. And it's somewhat disruptive to not just from a compliance standpoint, but the way financial services firms do business and earn their fees and their commissions or whatever it might be, however whatever their financial model is. The biggest thing about this COVID-19 on wealth management, I'll speak to it from a firm level and then from an advisor level. Mostly from the firm level, it's been compressed margins. If you look at a wealth management firm, they're making money primarily in a couple ways. They're making money on the percentage of the fees that their advisors and wealth managers, brokers, whatever you want to call them, are charging their clients. They're sharing in a small part of that, 10 to 15 basis points maybe. And not to make an assumption, but a basis point, 100 basis points make up 1%. So if I talk 15 basis points, I'm talking about 15% of 1%. Pretty small number, except for the fact that if you're managing $3 billion, 15 basis points on that is about $4.5 million of revenue. So that's really where you're driving your income to, to pay your folks. And a $3 billion firm is not a big firm. It's not small. That's probably what we would think of in terms of about a $20 million company, when it comes down to, gross revenues. So if you go from $3 billion assets under management on February 19th of 2020, and 3 weeks later, you're at nearly $2 billion, you've just lost about $1.5 million of your revenues in 3 weeks. And so that's a huge impact on how you're going to pay your people and continue to be staffed. I mentioned earlier about all those regulations. Those don't come without expense and effort and time. So, over the years, it's just been people have just had to do more. And so now the thought of furloughing people and skinning down the staff anymore with, new regulations continuing to come in and $1.5 million of revenues that you've just lost, that's a lot of compression and trying to figure out what you're going to do next. The other way that a firm makes money is on the cash balances. So if you've got a $3 billion firm again, you got to figure they probably have about $150 to $180 million in cash balances in people's accounts that they're making maybe 25 basis points on. So there's another $450,000 a year. Well, the problem with the Fed is they just reduced the Fed funds rate from about 1.5% down to 0. Now, they were maybe making 25 basis points on that $180 or $150 million. They now make 0 on that. So there's another, $500,000 or something that a firm of that size would have just lost. So between those two, that's almost $2 million worth of income, and that's probably about half of what they would generate on a net revenue basis every year. So not good. Because of that, I think we're going to see further consolidation in the industry. There has been a trend for that over the last several years to firms being gathered up in firms like Cetera, an advisor group, where they're going out and buying all these small broker dealers and rolling them into one larger broker dealer to get the economies of scale and shared services. I think you're going to continue to see more and more of that. And the other thing that's kind of gone with it, because of some of these pressures, some of those large consolidating firms, again, Cetera, Investment Center, Advisor Group, have had their credit ratings lowered because of some of that pressure. So it's they're kind of getting a double whammy there. From an operational standpoint, it's really working pretty well, and I think a lot of that has to do with 2001. After that, people's business continuity plans were put into place, and they've been tested maybe a couple of times since then. I mean, certainly they're testing their business continuity plans on a regular basis, but now that it's really been thrown into full deployment, it's actually worked really well. So I don't think if you're calling your broker or trying to move money around, you probably haven't seen much difference. Maybe a little bit of delay in somebody returning your email and maybe making a phone call, but overall it's been pretty good. At the advisor level, the rep out in the field, certainly they've felt that same pinch on the loss of revenues because their assets under management and they're getting paid a percentage of the assets that they manage for people. If that dropped by a third, so did their income, and frankly they're running on pretty thin margins as well. Haven't really heard of much in terms of staffing issues. They've really focused on client communications, which has been good. They're spending a lot of time making sure their clients are comfortable with what's going on, knowing that that they have access and to their money and have access to the people that can give them information. So that's all been good. Shifting to insurance, and I speak primarily to the life insurance side versus the commercial property insurance side. From a firm level, they've decided to put a lot of underwriting decisions have been put on hold, particularly for those who have what we call a table 2 or above. So that's somebody who's below standard, and that would certainly make sense with the comorbidity of COVID-19, that they would delay or postpone issuing or making a final underwriting decision and issuing policies on many of those individuals. So that's had some impact. Service issues are pretty bad, to be honest, and that says a lot for the insurance industry, because they're historically, probably about as bad as you can imagine. So, for them to be at historic highs is really bad. A lot of this has to do not only with just the systems that they operate on, but having offshored much of the service and back office functions to places like India and the Philippines and some places like that. That all sounded like a really good idea until you go through something like this, and now you have less, even less access to those people than you had before. Their countries are dealing with and going through their management of this crisis in a complete and different way than we may be here in the state in which you home office or operate out of. So that's been a really big problem. The other thing, though, that we have seen, for instance, Nationwide Insurance, based out of Columbus, Ohio, has a big operation here in Des Moines, Iowa, have announced that they are going to a permanent work at home for 4,000 workers here in Iowa. So that's a big downsizing. So that's certainly going to have an impact on commercial real estate. But the CEO of Nationwide also said that he could foresee as much as 50% of their entire workforce nationwide being work from home. So that's kind of the first peek at that I've really heard of a major company in the financial services business or outside of it that has said, hey, this work from home thing kind of works, and we're going to adopt it and go forward. I think anecdotally we've talked about it a little bit, that will this be in effect? But that's certainly a confirmation. From a agent level, I haven't really heard again too much. It's kind of much like the advisor level on the wealth management side. They're staying in touch with their clients, and again, some of their underwriting decisions, policies that they have in underwriting are being held up, and some service issues. So a few headaches there. From a banking standpoint, again, the Fed funds rate from 1.5% to 0% has compressed the margins tremendously. And the numerous furloughs have caused many of the remaining employees to become kind of universal bankers. So where you had people that were kind of highly specialized in certain services, they're being asked to take on many of the roles within the bank right now. Other than that, they've been obviously overwhelmed with PPP and EID and all the different federal loan programs and grant programs, and underwriting those and trying to process that with very limited guidance has been a real challenge for them. But they seem to be working through it and starting to get a handle on it a little bit better. So that's kind of what I'm hearing up to this point and seeing. Is anybody out there? Are you working in financial services, working with financial services firms, insurance agencies, wealth managers?
I'm in the process of working with a branch of Merrill Lynch, and about hopefully we'll get to half a dozen advisors to work with. We're not at that number yet, and I should be having conversations later this week with 3 of them. And they're all over the place. Like the one guy is a senior, only works with super high net worth, but doesn't like the fact that Merrill has this program in place that is called the growth grid, where no matter, if you have your choice clients, you still have to bring in new ones in order to reduce the percentage that the house takes from your action. So he's got his own set of circumstances. Other ones are younger and on the rise and looking to improve their abilities. So we'll see. I haven't heard those comments yet. I'm sure they exist, but I'm glad I listened to you so I can expect what to hear when I get on the phone with them.
Have they, some of those senior guys, have they talked about doing teams or bringing in juniors?
I don't know. I know of those situations existing, but I don't know if this one individual I'm referring to is looking at that as an option.
Anybody else working with financial services firms? Anybody else want to?
That's why we're here.
Yeah, Dan, I could ask, what do you think are the services that we can offer that are most applicable? I mean, I was talking to somebody in wealth management, but also insurance agents, so the smaller independent people, also a financial advisor with Edward Jones. I just wondered, which aspect or line do you think we could take sort of with our background from trusted advisors?
I think, you know, one, there's an opportunity for them just from a pure coaching standpoint to realign their goals, figuring out what it is that is most important to them. I think through this process, it's caused a lot of people to be more reflective than they've been in the past. And so usually financial advisors are, they want to flock to guys like Dan Sullivan or some of the more sales guru type coaches. But a few that I've talked to have started to talk about things that aren't so much about growing their business, but creating the kind of quality of life for them and their employees, and finding a better balance than some of the historically than they have historically talked about. You know, from other processes, you know, kind of depends on, you know, the size and where they sit. If they're sitting in a Merrill Lynch branch, they're really just going to kind of look at their book of business, and that's what they manage with, you know, depending on how big their book is. They may have one or two employees that are dedicated to them. But they're really more the branch's employees. So they're not, or they don't typically care a lot about investing in those folks. If you have a independent advisor who's, you know, got his own brick and mortar out in, you know, your small town, enter here, they may be more interested in some of the chapters from management, particularly thinking about that one mini process leading through change. Is that it, Wendy? Yeah, leading in times of change or something like that. I think it's collaborating for results, goal setting, and
the culture.
I thought the culture one was the one with the advanced insights.
It is.
Wendy, what are the chapters in the other? You're on mute. The 4th chapter.
Yep, I'm pulling it up so I'm not telling you any lies. Hold on. The first one is collaboration, communications, and goal planning, and that's leading through challenging times.
Yeah, and what are the 4 chapters there?
Collaboration, communications.
Turning goals into realities and GPS.
Yes.
I think that one would be a good one because it's not, that's you can do it either a 3 or a 4 hour process.
Yes.
So it's kind of quick, down and dirty. You're not really, I think they'd be more amenable to that because it's not as heavy lifting as, you know, executive coaching or excuse me, executive leadership or even the regular leadership process. And, you know, they could go through it as a team. But that, would get into those conversations that I was talking about earlier with, setting goals and creating that work-life balance.
I mean, the other area I think is looking just at their overall processes sometimes as well, just of their operations, whether one can do. I mean, it's along more the line of process excellence, but coming along from that aspect, I think some of them could benefit from that too.
Yeah, I think somewhat.
I
A
mean,
lot of that gets dictated to them by their business partners. So if they're aligned with a particular broker dealer or a particular insurance company, that dictates a lot of their systems and the programs they use and how they go about it. But there's certainly still room within the firm to improve.
Yeah.
yeah.
No, thanks.
Again, with process excellence, you're either looking to, with the same amount of resources and people, get more product or more transactions out the door with the same people, or if you're anticipating, how can we do this with less resources? How do you get the same amount of work done in a more efficient way so you don't have to so you can move those people to something that may be more productive than what they are doing now, because we're resource dependent, or it's too costly to run the process the way it is now. If we can develop another process stream that we can take those people off of that, put it onto something new and develop a new process, that's another way to look at process excellence. And the third, which we don't really give enough credit to, is you use process excellence to look for process flexibility, and you find a way for the existing process with a few minor changes to accommodate a whole nother line of business or product that can go through the same process with just minor changes. But our process excellence tools will allow you to do that. And my experience is with a commercial insurance company and how they write bid bonds for construction projects. We've done a process well, it was TQI back then, and then also just a CPA firm processing 1099 things through there. And we've done I did 3 CPAs just doing their 1099 process. And there's several other ones that I've done. And this was there's a tax account or a property tax accounting firm that redid 3 of their processes using TQI back then, but it applies incredibly well. It's small, it's quick. They're all the 3-day short versions of things. And they're using their entire workforce can just sit there and do it in, a little half-day increments or whole day, or that I could see you being able to do it remotely and do it virtually if you want. I got to think about that a little more, but you should be able to.
I mean, some processes have to be changed just because of the work from home aspect as well. Some people I've been talking about are struggling there because things that worked when they're all sitting in the office, they're fine, but once half of them are at home, no longer function.
Yep. Again, it's a great way to use the tool. Don't shy away from it.
So Dan, in about a week and a half, I am doing a virtual workshop for the CFA Society of Chicago. As we were on, I just looked them up a bit further. They have 5,000 investment professionals in their membership here.
In Chicago,
so I don't know how many people will be on this, Zoom meeting, but I'm starting to prepare for it, and I guess I'm going to prepare a little bit deeper now that I see that there could be a lot of people involved with this. And the topic is time management. And the way this evolved is one of their volunteers came to me late summer or fall and saw that they were doing a search and saw that I have time management as a process. And So the conversation went dead. I'd forgotten about them, and they came back to me about 2 weeks ago, and they said, let's do this. So I'm preparing for that. So with that, can you give me maybe a gut feeling on, so what's happened within this that has maybe disrupted their time management, other than the work from home disruptions that anyone would have? So what's different about their challenges in that area?
You know, I was thinking about that, and when Jeff started talking, he brought up kind of the time management piece. From a process, I'm not a process excellent TQI person, so that's really Jeff's forte.
And I'm not either, and I won't go there in this
Yeah,
workshop.
but
This hour that I have.
really got me thinking about that aspect of it, because where you can't necessarily improve some of the processes, like I said, because the software and the processes that you have to follow are dictated from the top down. You have a lot of just firefighting typically going on in the industry, and so helping people figure out where they're spending their time and where they should be spending their time on, you know, what's a fire and, you know, what's a cat stuck in a tree. And they tend to get more kittens out of the trees sometimes than they do firefighting. And so it's really, I think about, you know, it's not always what you do, it's what you're not doing that makes you most productive, and being focused on those things. So to answer your question, Tom, I don't know that much has changed. Like most things, I just think that that we're going through right now has just put a huge spotlight on failures in our processes and how we lead and manage people. I think it existed before. It just was easy to overlook. It was like, you know, you've gone nose blind to it. Yeah, right. So I think maybe that would be the only thing. I really can't think of anything that particularly would change.
The fundamentals remain. It's maybe just as important as ever to follow them or to apply them.
Right. And so from a time management standpoint, again, you know, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And maybe now the only other thing I can think of is that people are challenged by not just their day-to-day things, but they're also doing it with, you know, 2 dogs, 2 kids, a spouse. You know.
And homeschooling maybe, and whatever other.
Yeah. So you know, so their time management's become a whole new issue from that standpoint. So I would address it from work at home, but I would also address it, you know, just more simply, even just if you were in the office every day, how much time do you spend fighting fires and reacting versus consciously deciding those 3 things that you're going to be focused on first?
Yeah, and they had come to me pre-pandemic, the inquiry came. So they weren't asking me, but I'm just, you know, since we're all here today, I asked the question, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
That'll be a good opportunity.
Yeah.
Presumably.
If you bring up the time, the challenges of managing time at home or working from home or whatever that we're all dealing with, I don't know. You're making me think about process again, and you need to acknowledge the fact that it could be a process that isn't working or doesn't work as efficiently from home, and at least say that, you know, that's not the purpose of what we're talking about today. But if you have questions on it, you know, feel free to call, and I've got the resources to be able to help you with that, but it's just not what we're here to talk about today. And then funnel them all off to Wendy and let her deal with them.
And maybe something will trickle down to you, right?
Well, it's an opportunity, because I think it's a real issue that affects time management as well as something we've all been thrown into, and that's how do we, what our processes are when we have to do things remotely.
I suspect this particular audience is going to be pretty diverse. We may have some people in larger firms, and then you'll have the solo
Mhm.
CFAs and what have you. I'll find out.
I got a note down here to define a thing on the new wastes from working at home. You could do waste walks around home. You could do all sorts of fun stuff and do a whole presentation on that.
Oh, time wasters in effect.
Well, process waste, and some of that's time, yeah. But what do we have to do twice because we're working at home, or 3 times because we're working at home, and that's all waste?
Mhm.
Reworks and, oh God, I won't get into it.
But just the way we push, way we push paper, right?
Yes.
Uh,
But we've taken commuting out of the picture, so we got that going for us.
that's true.
We got 2 hours extra a day to be inefficient.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a general positivity that with the folks that I've talked to that will be back to normal as quickly as possible in these industries. That they're being mostly service related. They can turn the switch. Well, they really haven't turned the switch off so much. They've really just kind of deployed, like I said, the business continuity plan.
Mhm.
So they can, bring people back on their own schedule. It's working really, really well for them right now. As far as, continuing to, talk to customers, move paper, get loans approved, make distribution payments, deploy assets. All of that's relatively uninterrupted.
Something I've gotten contacted in the last couple of weeks by 2 turnaround companies. One guy wanting to just do them as a small team of 2 that is going to go out and work with a market niche of manufacturers that are going to be right on the edge of bankruptcy just because of the startup costs and the difficulties in producing stuff right now. And they approached me on kind of more the operational side, but they can go in and do a financial, here's how you got to manage your cash over the next 13 to 20 weeks to make sure that you stay viable and stay out of bankruptcy. But stage 2 of their process, after they go in and do a detailed look at the financials, is let's look at your organization and really try to have it come out and add value to the organization. So, operationally, which could be looking at processes, it's going to be looking at people and culture and even the team that's there in terms of leadership and the turnaround guys. And I'm assuming that the banks that are lending, have the business loans out there are going to have to start coaching people about how to stay liquid during, as they're coming out of the thing. I think we can add value there too. Only because I've gotten 2 calls and they're asking me, how can you support us doing this? We can handle the heavy financial analysis, but we don't have the answers of how to lead and operate so that you can hit the numbers you're trying to. And even for that matter, the strategic planning around it too, that I just hadn't thought of until just a second ago. So, over the next 6 to 8 months, there's going to be a lot of demand for small to medium size help. And it's going to be the owners are going to be the bankers and the turnaround guys.
That makes me kind of think, we're kind of shifting off financial services, but just in general, Jeff, you're talking about strategic planning. Are you seeing, or do you anticipate any, or anybody, Tom, Laura, Robert, Andrew, Wendy, Virginia, any shift in some of the strategic planning being maybe simplified and kind of targeted towards what's our 12-month plan? The getting past this versus the where are we going in 3 to 5 years? I think there's a lot of people are trying to figure out how am I going to get to Tuesday.
I think a sort of mini strategic plan to say, what assumptions did you make or had you made in the past that are no longer valid? What do I need to adjust now? And it's perhaps not a full strategic plan, but look, what's the basis of the plan that I had and what's changed there? And what will I need to adapt as a result of that?
Or what's the plan that I have to deploy in order to get back onto my strategic plan?
And I'd say revisit, if they already have the plan done, it's a matter of revisiting the critical goal categories.
Mm-hmm.
And what, if anything, do we need to adjust in each of our critical goal categories to meet the next 12 to 18 months versus 3 to 5 years? Like, make it much smaller chunks.
But you'd add a SWOT piece to an annual goals review, because they need to throw darts at what's out there and where they see things, and then revisit their goal category. So it's sort of a hybrid. You get bits and pieces from the big process, and even there are parts of the annual goals that could be revised question-wise to maybe reflect the current environment a little bit more than what's there. I mean, you're asking productivity questions, and I don't know. I could probably pull mine off the bookshelf here, but there are certain categories that the annual goals review process asks you to consider. And that wouldn't be a bad task to try to do, is to come up with some current questions for an annual goals review if people are doing that.
Yeah, I think for some companies, like we talked about in our earlier call today, that they're killing it right now. Things are better than ever. They're having their best quarter ever. Just because of the industry they're in, and they're serving some niche. But then there's others, like the restaurant industry. Obviously, that landscape may be changed forever. And then there's all those that are kind of in between. So to your point, Jeff, with the SWOT onto the annual goals review is probably would be a nice conversation to take somebody through. And for others, like I said, where the landscapes dramatically change, it's probably going to be a much deeper conversation than those that are just kind of getting through this and waiting for everybody to turn the lights back on and go into the office. That's that Jeff look. He's burning some mental calories right now.
No, I don't. If you're able to do that, I mean, if you're doing an annual goals review, you're sort of doing a discovery and wants and needs type thing for a financial planner or an insurance agent or any of those guys. And all it's going to do is say, well, while we have them at home, we can do this training and development with my team, because that's not necessarily a strength. It's, getting their team while they're remote engaged in a conversation about what we can create. It's the opportunities. It's a really exciting opportunity that you can get the agent together with his team and start talking about this stuff, setting goals. What can we do? How can we get better? That's got to be a benefit to a lot of these guys.
Yeah, it's a real morale builder, right?
Yeah.
For people to begin not just thinking, woe is me, and oh my gosh, we're gonna, here's how bad it is, to start being forward looking about positive things and directing their energies that way.
That's an interesting point, and I totally agree with it. I'm wondering, in these scenarios with an insurance agent that is similar to a financial advisor, where those people are by and large in business for themselves. You know, they're at a firm and they're paying the firm certain fees for the money they bring in. There's add-on costs for an assistant. There's add-on costs for a coach. You know, there's add-on costs for really so many things. So I like this idea of how we're going to get things done together, but could anybody help me boil that down to the one individual that might be working within that firm and how it relates to he or she?
Which aspect?
Building on an idea, taking the opportunity now while at home to engage in how to build things, how to get things going, how to look for new solutions and set new goals. I love the idea of the interaction. I would love to see these advisors maybe interact with each other, even though they're all independent people, kind of like we are right now, as a matter of fact. To just take that to that level of, I don't know, camaraderie or further engagement to help each of them do a better job on their own because they're independent business people.
I know a couple of people in my professional circles who are independent financial planners, and their clients are consumers, you know, individual consumers and families. And I guess what I'm struggling with is what has changed, because like I was on a call last week with one of them, and he said that not much has really changed for him. He's signing on new clients. He's managing their family's finances. You know, maybe there's new questions and things that have changed because the client situation has changed. I guess I'm not under the impression that they're home with extra time, because their client base didn't erode because of the health crisis. I know that doesn't address your question, Robert. I don't have any clients in this area, but the people that I know who are working in this area, I haven't seen that be their situation.
I think Virginia's absolutely correct. You know, they haven't seen really that much change. They're just where they're doing it. But I think everybody has taken a step back a little bit and maybe viewing things a little differently. So, and if Robert, I heard your question, what you were asking him, but the real question was what kind of conversation can I be having with this person that would motivate them towards taking action? And this is where we need Doug with his 50 questions or 50 ways to ask a question. But I would just ask, you know, the questions about, to what degree have any of your goals changed? Have you added any new goals? What do you know, what have you learned through this process? How would you how would you reposition your organization for future black swan events like this? You know, just all of those get him talking and, you know, listen for what is really has him or her most upset and willing to take immediate action to start working on.
Okay, thank you.
So as Doug would say, you know, kind of that goal planning sheet in front of your face, you know, what would you like to achieve? What's the rewards? What's the consequences? And why haven't you already done it?
So much comes back to the goal planning sheets. It's amazing.
It does. And I fought them you know, at first I thought that was just ridiculous. I didn't get it for the longest time. And now I'm a believer. Andrew, did you successfully make your move? I see Utah in the background, but
Yes, no, well, I'm not there at the moment. Yeah, no, I successfully made the move towards the end of last year, and I'm actually working with the local chamber of commerce here on their strategy at the moment. And I picked up one client there who's really all over the place with his time management, but really just understanding his business. So I think there's some new opportunities here, but it's obviously slow in this environment where there's no other contact. But yeah, no. So I've still got a bit of Utah in the background, as you can see, Dan.
I think, you know, the slowing down of things really, it's just so much hard. As great as Zoom is, and I've been using this for 5 years, as great as it is, it doesn't substitute kneecap to kneecap over a cup of coffee for getting somebody to say, let's do that.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
You know, 'cause it's much easier to say, hey, would you like to grab a cup of coffee than would you like to grab a Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Well, and
people
it's
are-
also easier if you want to scribble things down, which I often like to do on a pad of paper in front of them.
Yeah, the cocktail napkin scribbles, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there is a little Zoom fatigue going on too.
Mm.
I know I've got it.
Yeah.
You know, let's go back to financial advisors for a moment. There's a lot of them out there. And in order for someone to, you know, getting new clients, I think a lot of them have been relying on those face-to-face meetings. You know, it is about know, like, and trust. And those have been relying on the face-to-face and now can't have them. I think that there's some things that they need to think about moving ahead in terms of, because I suspect that Zoom versus face-to-face is an obstacle to them getting as many new clients as they once did.
Yeah, which is another great question for Robert or for anybody to ask a financial advisor, or, you know, whether it's a wealth management or insurance. How do you acquire new clients?
Yeah, that's been one of the questions we've been having. It's funny, some of them are really good at hitting all of the different bases and all of the different avenues. And others just don't like to, I don't know, in one case, they don't like to go to networking events. And nobody does really. But if that is something that historically produces X percent of business and that percent is big enough that you have to do it, you have to do it. So I think that you're right. That is a conversation I have had.
Yeah, but this could be a chance to further refine some of those referrals. Why are you getting referrals? Why are you not getting referrals? Which actually leads to what is your customer experience? If you're not getting referrals, it probably has more to do with your customer experience and their journey and dealings with your firm and your people than it does. And well, hopefully it's not your abilities, because if it was your abilities, they'd probably move their money someplace else.
I mean, I had last week, my financial advisor had organized a Zoom call with about 10 of her clients and just talking about it. And that was a great way, I think, of just the client communication, engaging with them, is also helping for referrals that during this period of time to go over everything, the state of the market and just what their views on that. So I thought that was an excellent idea.
I don't think anyone's going to, when all this is over, say my financial advisor communicated with me too much.
Exactly.
Okay.
Wendy, do you have anything else that you want us to cover, or did we?
I do not. Are there any other questions for Dan or any topics you want to discuss? We have a couple minutes left.
Has anybody dealt with CPAs in this environment lately? Is there sort
Yeah,
of
This is Mike. My camera's off because I'm wandering around. I don't want to make you seasick. But yes, I have a client that's a CPA.
Okay. What are they dealing with these days?
Their client load has not come down, but the client tasking has gone way up. Everybody's asking about how to prepare their books to get the federal loans and other things. And, you know, some of them go through banks and some of them go directly to the SBA, and it's a little bit different process. And so that's keeping them very busy. The extension to July 15th just kind of prolonged the agony in their mind, as opposed to, you know, providing an ease of workload. The people that they're giving advice to, they're not charging. And some CPAs are. And so what they're doing is, if ever a new client comes and says, how much would you charge for that? They say, oh, it's complimentary. And they're picking up new clients that way, because some CPAs are charging $200 to $1,000 to advise them on how to set their business up for the loans. So that's a nice marketing technique. As far as I'm concerned, we were in the middle of strategic planning, and they said, my mind is too messed up right now. I can't go on. We'll pick it up on July 16th, right? So, you know, we're friends, so we talk, and I'm providing complimentary consulting to them, coaching.
Okay.
Excellent.
But they would have a lot of the same, they've got a team, they've got an office. They may be working virtually or at least in a new work arrangement. So talking to the main CPA or the partner or whatever and say, you know, how's morale? How is the processes? How's, you know, working from home, time management, everything, that's still all applies to them just as well as the other groups we talked about, right?
Yeah, and what I'm finding for them, and it's not unique to them, is that the reaction is mixed, right? They're tired of being cooped up. They're kind of working, they go into the office maybe one day a week and kind of go back and forth. And so they kind of have two offices now, whereas before they just had the separation between home and office. And so that's a little bit frustrating. On the other hand, a lot of their work was by phone. And now they can actually see their clients, and they're just delighted with that, as are the clients. And so that's kind of a big positive.
Okay. And instead of the client walking in with their stack of receipts, walking into the conference room, they got to find a way to do that remotely, huh?
Yeah, but a small percentage of their clients were bringing in paper, you know, maybe 10%-ish, more or less. Most of the people found a way to either mail it, you know, in a FedEx package, or upload it via one of the document, you know, the secure document sites.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That makes me think back, Jeff, you talking about processes, and particularly with financial advisors doing quarterly reviews with their clients, if they're doing quarterlies, and certainly they're doing at least annuals, and how maybe that has or should cause them to rethink that process. You know, and can it be delivered this way, as opposed to having to bring them, you know, right now, some of the more sophisticated financial advisors will bring them in the conference room. You know, they've got the 42-inch screen up on the back wall, and, you know, and they run all the pie charts and everything up there and show your allocations and your returns and all the fancy graphs. Boy, I mean, you can do that through this environment, you know, through share screens, but you know, those that don't necessarily have the conference space or the money to invest in the technology to do it in their office, you know, this is a pretty easy way of maybe building out and improving their customer experience, which leads to the referrals and those other sorts of things.
Okay.
Any last questions for Dan? All right, thank you, Dan, for taking this time to walk us through financial services. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
No, thanks, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Goodbye, everybody.
Please stay
See
safe.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.